Hi, hello everyone. Lovis, I think we are on air right now. So just guys, if just confirm in the message if you can hear us well and you can see the first slide of the topic of today. I'm checking on the message. Perfect. Thank you. Thumbs up. So hello everyone. So I'm Asma Karwi. I'm from Tunisia and happy to be in this event, the first in his kind. So thank you for attending. Today's session will be about the Agile PMO. So and we will discover together the strategies on how to navigate the hybrid world. So and please join me to welcome our Lovis Nogi from Cameroon, a transformational leader with more than 20 years driving organizational success through project management strategies. So, Lovis, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Asma. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll go straight away to the presentation. So, one word to describe me: I am a transformational leader. I have over 20 years of experience managing transformational projects. I have the PMI Triple P certification. I'm portfolio manager, certified manager, program certified manager, and also project manager. So basically, I also have an MBA in project management from Rome Business School. Currently, I am senior IT project manager for Orange Cameroon. So that is the summary of myself. I'm a recognized expert. I have 3 LinkedIn top community badges, top project management voice, top program management voice, and top project portfolio management voice. So thank you very much for joining this call. Today, at the end of this presentation, you should 2 things to take away. Number one, you're going to have a framework on how to make your PMO agile and able to strive in a hybrid environment. Number two, you're going to understand what an agile PMO is all about. So on the agenda, we're going to look at 12 slides. I'll go fast and we'll go straight to the points. So thank you very much. Let's begin. Now, I begin my slide with a question. Is your PMO an obstacle or an opportunity? It's a very serious question and it needs a serious answer. Basically, most PMOs are traditional PMOs. It means they have a certain structure, a certain process that they try to follow. And majority of the time, big organizations who are functional in nature. So therefore, these traditional PMOs try to align to those functional organizations. Now, the problem with this is that in those kind of settings, you always have what they call communication breakdowns. Because now you have structures, you have functions, you have departments, you have entities. You also have challenges like things like decreased visibility, where what is going on in a certain department or entity is not known by me, even the PMO. There are organizations even where you have multiple PMOs across different entities in the same organization. So all those problems is what is experienced by traditional PMOs. And now there is a quote here by Gartner in 2023 where he said 70 of the PMOs fail to deliver on strategic objectives because they fail to adapt to the hybrid work model. Today, the world is going hybrid in terms of the way we work. You have remote teams, you have co-located teams. The way we do projects, you also have projects that are managed from a distance, projects that are managed on site. You have projects that use the waterfall methodology and those that use the agile methodology. So the fact that our work nature now is hybrid, we also need to adapt to that scenario. And the solution which I'll propose here will be a framework that helps PMOs to adapt to the hybrid workplace. Now, the agile PMO is actually your key to hybrid success. Because when we talk about agile PMO, I use the word agile here more like an adjective to describe the aspect of fast, adaptive, flexible. So it's true we are going to look at agile principles like iterative planning, continuous feedback, but the key point about agile PMOs is that they should be able to be flexible and adaptive. It means if they have to be agile, they have to have what you call empowered teams. That means teams are able to self-organize and take decisions. So you should have key decision makers in the PMO. They should also be able to do what I call iterative planning, because traditionally in the waterfall method, it's a forward pass. Just you go forward once. But with Agile, you always have to come back to modify and update the plan based on feedback you get from end users. Also, in my framework, I'm going to talk about Agile, about PMOs being what I call data-driven decision making. So they should be able to have systems that generate KPIs, which they can use to manage how projects are advancing in the organization. Also, in the framework, there should be the system of continuous improvement, like based on feedback, lessons learned, retrospectives. PMOs should be able to adapt and make changes on their processes and their structures to adapt to the realities on ground. Now, in terms of the data-driven insights, research has shown that there is a positive impact of Agile PMOs in hybrid settings. And we're going to look at three key metrics. The first one is by PMI in 2023, which stated, and I quote, that the project success rate has increased tremendously by 15% for PMOs that adapt to hybrid environments. Also, McKinsey, a consulting firm, in 2022 said the time to market drastically reduced to 20% for Agile PMOs. And the last one is Gallup. Gallup is an international consulting firm based in the UAE, if I'm not mistaken. In 2024, they said that for Agile PMOs, employees that work with Agile PMOs noticed a drastic employee engagement of up to 10%. So the data speaks for itself. The data is the proof that we need to have Agile PMOs that can adapt to those hybrid scenarios. Now, like I said, I promised I was going to give a roadmap. So basically, we have a roadmap made of 5 stages. The first stage for any Agile PMO to be able to adapt to those hybrid environments should be to assess their current state. For example, what happens presently? What are the pain points? Are there areas for improvements? And they can do this through surveys, interviews, questionnaires, and other forms of data collection methods from within the organization where they are found. Now, the second thing is they have to develop a culture. And when we talk about culture, we talk about mindset. It has to be a top-down scenario, like from leadership downwards to the rest of the company. So looking at trainings, looking at principles, practices, tools that are supposed to help to shape the mindset of the PMOs and those that work there. And of course, they can also implement what I call pilot projects to test the hybrid scenarios. Now, I know that most PMOs manage projects that are waterfall, but you can have a scenario where you can have more of hybrid projects. That's projects where you begin with the waterfall, and then midway within the execution phase, you carry out hybrid in order to have iterations and minimum viable products, so that the customers and clients can provide feedback, which can be used now to make some improvements. So that's the next step. The third step, implement pilot projects. The fourth should be to scale up. Once the pilot projects have succeeded, now progressively the PMOs can expand maybe to other entities, to other functions within the organizations, and so on and so forth. And last but not the least, they have to monitor and adapt. It's important to track your progress, to gather feedback, and then to make refinements based on the feedback you get. So basically, this is the roadmap for Agile PMO transformation. Now, I'm going to talk about proven results in real-world organizations, and I'm going to begin first with Spotify, a technology company. I'll explain to you the challenge they faced, the solution they implemented, and the results they got. So with Spotify, they had a challenge of an increasingly complex product development environment. The release cycles were slower, and the challenges in coordinating multiple teams. Like I said, the challenge you always have is that most organizations today are big organizations. They are functional. They have many functions and many departments. Now, what was the solution? They adopted a model which they call the Spotify model. So basically, the Spotify model was a unique Agile framework in which they had what we call autonomous squads, tribes, and chapters and guilds, which means they empowered their teams to be able to own the work, collaborate, and deliver the value. So instead of having a scenario where you have to go through different governance instances in the organization, they were able to empower teams that work as squads. So that was the Spotify model. And the result for that was there was an increase in product release frequency. There was a faster time to market and an improved employee autonomy and satisfaction. And that obviously enhanced innovation with Spotify. So that's the first case study. The second case study is in a financial service institution, ING Bank. In ING Bank, they also face a similar challenge to Spotify. They had slow and bureaucratic decision-making processes, and that is typical of most multinational organizations that have functions. For example, you have maybe the CEO, you have the CXOs, then you have the senior managers, top managers, all the way down to the staff. So it's something which is common with those kind of organizations. So what did they do in terms of solution? They were able to transform themselves into an agile organization with cross-functional teams. They did iterative planning, continuous delivery. And in fact, it's similar to what Spotify did. But the goal is that, the point is that they were able to implement their PMOs to be agile in that hybrid environment. And of course, it leads to an increase in the speed of innovation, improve customer experience, a reduced time to market, and of course, the employees felt more engaged because now they were autonomous, they were what you call self-organizing, they could take decisions by themselves without going through the bureaucratic process. And the third case study is made in the healthcare domain, John Hopkins Medicine. Now the challenge too was similar to Spotify and ING. You have a complex project landscape and resource constraints, and therefore they were able to implement a hybrid agile approach. So they combined Scrum and Kanban methodologies as well as the waterfall, and they were able to respond to emerging priorities. Of course, it also led to an improvement in project visibility, increased team collaboration, and faster decision-making process. So basically, the three examples I've given goes to show that companies that are functional in nature, that have a traditional PMO, once they adapted to an agile PMO in a hybrid setting, they were able to deliver better results and better feedback from their customers. Now, I gave a roadmap before. The roadmap had about 6 points. The roadmap still has some limitations or challenges. One of the first challenges you're going to face if you want to implement the roadmap, which I suggested, is resistance to change. Resistance to change is one of the biggest factor or one of the biggest barrier to making any change in an organization, especially organizations that are functional in nature. The next one is lack of expertise. Sometimes the organizations may be willing, but they don't know how to go about it. So it's your role as the expert to be what I call agile capabilities to ensure there is upskilling, or otherwise you bring in fresh blood, a consultant within the organization to help to drive this kind of change. Of course, you need also to be able to measure the challenges. That's another challenge that we always face. Because sometimes if you're using traditional metrics now, you cannot fully capture the value of agile PMOs unless you give it time. Because of course, some of the benefits could be long-term, not immediately short-term. So for each of the limitations that I mentioned above, I've given a kind of a mitigation strategy. For example, on the issue of resistance to change, strong leadership could help to mitigate that limitation. Executive sponsorship from top management and CXOs can go a long way to push PMOs to become agile. Number two, on the challenge of lack of expertise, communication and training can go a long way to solve that. Because if people don't have the capabilities, when you have them trained and you communicate frequently, it becomes part and parcel of their culture and mindset. Another thing too is that it might be difficult initially to celebrate, to measure the challenges, but I think that if you are able to celebrate successes, for example, like in the roadmap, I mentioned about pilot projects, which agile PMOs can take. When those pilot projects succeed, and then the celebration is done and communicated throughout the entire company, it makes people to have an idea about what the agile PMOs are doing. So for me, it's one of the mitigation strategy if you have challenges on how to measure or how to put in place KPIs to measure successes for agile PMOs. Also, so in all of this, the PMO has a critical role to lead that transformation. It's true that we need top management support, but the PMO can or should be the one to lead. And how can the PMO lead? Number one, the PMO should be an agile champion. The PMO should be the one to advocate for agile principles and practices at all levels of the organization, whether top management level, senior management level, middle management level, staff level. Also, the PMO should do what I call build a coalition of change agents. So they should be able to influence stakeholders, key stakeholders, and influencers within the organization to give that to support the transformation. Because it's more about gaining grounds, it's more about building a coalition of forces that can support what the PMO is trying to do in the organization. So that's another thing which the PMO too can do. The next thing is the PMO should be able to provide training and coaching, equip the teams that they have, the team of project managers, scrum masters, equip them with the knowledge and the skills they need to succeed in an agile environment. And let me say something to clarify. When I speak of agile in this case, I'm not speaking only about the agile methodology. I'm speaking about the concept of being adaptable and flexible. So it's good to mention that. So agile here speaks of flexibility and adaptability. So it includes, amongst other things, adapting to both agile methodologies and waterfall methodologies, adapting to remote way of working and on-site way of working, generally reacting to changes. Another thing too which the PMO should do is to create a safe space, an environment where experiments can be done, because if a company has or an organization has not done this before, they can pick up a set of pilot projects to pilot that. And then based on the successes they get or the feedback they get at the end of the day, they can celebrate success and share that with the rest of the company so that it can become a lessons learned and a model for other aspects of the entity of the organization to follow. Because I understand that sometimes in an organization you can have multiple entities and each entity has a PMO and you don't have a global PMO over the entire organization. So that's a point also to take note of. Okay, another point which I'll mention also is a hybrid workspace. Today we realize that after COVID-19, the way of work is different from the way it was before COVID-19. Today we have a hybrid work setting where you have remote workers, you have remote team members, you have on-site team members. And that presents a new frontier for PMOs too today. Now, on one hand, it presents an opportunity. On the other hand, it presents challenges. I'll start with the opportunities. For the opportunity, the fact that we have a hybrid workplace today means that PMOs can have what I call an expanded talent pool. So if you're based, for example, say in Cameroon, you can have talents from all over the world who are remotely based, but who are part of the PMO, working for the PMO or working with the PMO. So the hybrid workspace presents an access to a global workforce with diverse skills and perspective, which is very good. Because before then, we used to say, okay, everybody in the PMO should be co-located in the same environment. But right now, with what's going on in the world, with the hybrid workplace, I think there's a possibility to expand your talent pool. The next thing is there's flexibility. Because of course, now team members can work in ways that would optimize their productivity and well-being. Let's say, for example, like in this conference call today, we are found in different time zones and different geographical locations. Imagine a scenario where we are all part of a PMO, and then it will mean, of course, that different team members will have the flexibility to work as per what would enhance their productivity and well-being. There is no constraint on the team. The next thing too also is that having remote teams will help to reduce overhead costs. Imagine trying to bring in new team members into the country or into the organization where it's found, and you realize that you have to pay for maybe relocation costs, maybe the cost of mobilization and all of that. But with the hybrid workspace today, you have that possibility to engage people from where they are without necessarily doing the relocation. So it's a dramatic reduction in overhead costs, and PMOs can take advantage of that to build an agile PMO. Of course, there are challenges too with the hybrid workplace setting. You have the challenge, of course, of maintaining team cohesion. Like, for example, how do you maintain a sense of community and belonging across different team members who are geographically dispersed? Maybe different continents, different countries. How do you do that? How do you manage performance? How do you know if a team member is performing or not in a hybrid setting? How do you ensure they're accountable for their task or their responsibilities? How do you integrate? What technology do you use to integrate to ensure collaboration and communication? So all those are challenges also that PMOs may face. But for every challenge, there are possibilities to mitigate. So the key takeaway is that number one, Agile PMO is the future of project management. That's the first thing to note. It means your PMO has to be adaptable and flexible. That's the key point. Second key point, hybrid work is here to stay. You will always have scenarios where you have remote workers and on-site workers. That's the future. After COVID-19, it became the norm. So hybrid work is here to stay, and Agile PMOs are the best way to equip or to navigate those challenges. That's the first thing. Number two, you need also to use Agile principles in addition to waterfall. Because like I said, traditionally, most PMOs are traditional in the sense that they have processes and they have a structure, which is maybe based on the functional structure of the organization. So you need to embrace Agile principles to drive successes. Number two, you need to have systems that enable you as a PMO to take what I call data-driven decisions. Very important. Because the data-driven decisions will help you to improve, will help you to ameliorate either your processes, either the way you do things, either the KPIs, and so on and so forth. So finally, and not last but not the least, PMOs have a very critical role to play as far as leading the organization's agile transformation. And they themselves have to be agile. So, call to action. Do not let your PMO to become obsolete. Embrace the agile culture, adapt your practices, your processes, and of course, if you do that, you'll be able to unlock your organization's full potential in the hybrid workspace. So thank you. That will be all for my presentation. If you have questions, I'll be ready to.
Thank you, Lovis. Thank you so much. Actually, we have one question from Sausan Qalai. Sausan, she is asking, what is the TMO, Transformation Management Office, and how does it differ from the Agile PMO?
Please, can you take a question again?
What is the TMO, Transformation Management Office, and how does it differ? What is the actually the difference between Agile PMO and the Transformation PMO?
Okay. The Agile PMO simply means a PMO that can adapt. Now, transformation doesn't necessarily mean you can adapt. It means, for example, you can maybe carry out transformational projects in the organization. There's projects or programs that help to transform the organization. For example, imagine you're trying to do digitalization, and before maybe the company was not digitalized, but after your projects or programs, they are now digitalized. So most PMOs are traditional, even though they do transformational projects. So you could call them transformational PMOs. But an agile PMO is much more a PMO that can adapt. That's really the concept. A PMO that is flexible and can adapt. They can adapt to the methodologies. They can adapt to the way of working. They can adapt to the structure of the organization. Because today you have projects can be managed either through the agile methodology or the waterfall methodology. Now PMO should be able to adapt to both. That's what it means. Now you also have people that work within the organization in the same geographical site that they are co-located, and people that work remotely, but they're also part of the organization. That's what I call hybrid workspace. So PMO should also be able to adapt to that kind of setting.
Okay.
So it's at two levels: level of the project and the level also of the organization itself.
Okay.
And the concept of agile, like I said, is more PMOs that are flexible and adaptive. So they adapt to the reality on ground.
Perfect. Sausan, I hope it is clear. There is actually two other questions or three. We still have 4 minutes. So there is a question: how do we introduce agile in the public sector project-based structure? So
That's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. Now, when you say public sector, can you be a little bit more specific? What is the public sector made up of? Who are the key stakeholders? just to have an idea on how to answer your question best.
Yeah. Beth, Jiton, if you can be more precise about the public sector, I don't know from the example that we mentioned, do we have anyone public sector? Let me check.
Okay.
Maybe
In the case of no, we don't have a public
no.
sector yet. No, we don't have.
Yeah.
It's private sector. But I think you can use the same framework which I mentioned. I don't know if you can see my screen on a strategic framework, a roadmap to agile PMO transformation. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
5 key points. I also spoke about the challenges that you're going to face and how to mitigate them. So if you look at the challenges, one of the challenges you're going to face in the public sector would be what I call resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that resistance to change, the key there is strong leadership. It means, for example, if that public sector maybe is the health, maybe you can have a minister of health, you can have a delegate of health. I don't know how it works over there in your country, but I'm looking at a scenario where if I don't know how the health sector is organized in your country, but maybe if you have departments, you have entities, and maybe you have a PMO, even if it's traditional, you can start by gaining what I call key stakeholder support. Maybe you start at the level of the delegates, you go to the level of maybe the
Mm.
provincial or the regional delegates, you go to the level of the minister, try to make them to understand the benefit of agile,
Yeah.
because you need to be able to have leadership support to make it work.
Yeah.
If you don't have leadership support, it's not going to work. So you have to find a way to get leadership support, irrespective of whether it's public sector or private sector. It's the same concept, same idea.
Yeah. I don't know if we have time. We still have time for a last question. Thank you, Lovis, for these insightful answers. One last question, but then maybe we can go to the lounge to develop more. So the question is, when it comes to executive and seniors management reviews for agile project, how do we report go live date? I think this is more digital project. So how do we report go live project date when it is multiple tracks and release in a hybrid project? So it is kind of challenging because the seniors, they want like only high level informations and the statute milestones are very clear. So as we are in hybrid project, it seems challenging. So how best?
Okay, I would answer your question in this way. I'll give my own example. I work in an organization that is purely functional, and normally we have governance processes in place to ensure that all the top managers and senior managers and leaders have a visibility on what's going on in the project, which means that we are actually doing waterfall. But what I do is that after the initiating phase and the planning phase, during the execution phase, I laid out in agile methodology. That means I do releases, I do sprints, and I release
Mhm.
versions. So what I do is that in the governance meetings, um, I would have the plan. I'll let senior management know that okay, I'm actually doing a hybrid methodology. That means I'll follow the normal waterfall so that I can have different validations at different points. But during the execution, I'm going to release by versions, and I give a kind of a milestone or a roadmap on how the versions will be
Mhm.
released. So if I'm
Yeah.
releasing the first version, I'll go to an instance, a governance instance, and present what has been done, what is maybe ongoing, and maybe the next step. And then maybe key points with respect to the different leaders, because the way my organization operates is that it operates in a sense that we have different entities and different units. And the team is a cross-functional team. It means you have to report to different sponsors and different key stakeholders. So I make
Mhm.
sure I give information that is relevant to each of the key stakeholders in the presentation. But usually it's not much. So during go live, I say, okay, go live, maybe release one or version one, the minimum viable product. I give what
Yeah.
has been done, maybe what is ongoing, and the next step. The next step now could be version 2 or version 3 with
Yeah.
dates. Because agile really does not emphasize on that kind of system of reporting.
Mhm.
Because the whole concept about agile is having a self-organizing team, meaning that in your team you guys can take decisions and move ahead. Whereas if you
Yeah.
talk about senior management, it means you still have to come back and attend governance meetings. So in reality, it's
Mhm.
hybrid methodology. But I advise you to follow the hybrid methodology at the level of implementation now or execution. you do agile,
Mhm.
and where you release, for each release, you go to an instance and present to have a goal or a validation for the next release. That's what
Mhm.
I would do, and that's what I
Definitely.
do.
Yeah, definitely. So governance, communication, stakeholders, I think, and stay structured while being agile and dynamic. So thank you so much, Lovis. I think this is a fantastic and amazing insights. And thank you everyone for your questions. You can, I think, stay on and join the lounge. We still have a panel after this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Do we have any last words, Lovis, before closing this session?
No, I don't have a last word. The only thing I would say is that PMOs should strive to be agile. It's very
Yeah.
important.
Perfect. So the call to action, go agile. Thank you.
Go agile.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Shout out for
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye bye.